Well, Ian, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today. And I thought I might open our conversation by asking you a little bit about why you're a writer, why you tell stories.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it was something I was obsessed with even when I was a little kid. Uh, the first script I ever wrote was a 50-page series of crayon drawn recreations of scenes from Ghostbusters when I was like 5. And I'm a terrible artist, by the way, so none of these looked even remotely like anything human or ghost. Like it was, a bunch of like, oh, this squiggly brown line, that's Bill Murray. Uh, it was something that I took a lot of fulfillment in even back then. And when my mom would fold laundry on the couch, I would make movies for her on the coffee table where I would build cities out of Legos and blocks, and then have my pet monster destroy the city, or have toss micro machine cars all around. Like you could see a lot of that stuff in the the movies that I work on now. But as I got older, the thing that really inspired me was I grew up in Park City, Utah, going to Sundance every year when I was a kid, and I was always so excited whenever all those filmmakers would come to town, because you could see people who a couple months ago were just scraping by and financing movies on credit cards, and then all of a sudden their lives change overnight at this fest. Uh, so that was definitely an inspiration to me. And at my middle school, they held the junior Sundance screenwriting contest where you had to write like 5 pages of a screenplay, and so I entered something in that, and it was the first thing I had ever won. Like, I'd never scored a basket or made a goal or a touchdown, but I won that, and I was like, hey, well, maybe this is something I can stick with. So the following year, I wrote my first like full length feature, and basically kept writing one per year every year after that until I was an adult.
Wow, that's great. A great origin story that you have there, from the Ghostbusters drawings to the big screen.
Oh, what's funny is the the thing that really made me sit down and write that first feature was I was 12 years old, and I tried to go see the movie Trainspotting, and they wouldn't let me into the theater. They wouldn't sell me a ticket. They're like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, 20, and then like, bullshit, get out of here. So I walked out of the theater, and I went next door to Barnes and Noble, and I found a copy of the Trainspotting screenplay in the movie section there. And I just read the first page. It was so blown away by it. Like I'd never seen a script before, much less something like that with that amazing monologue that John Hodge wrote. And I bought it right there. I read it cover to cover, 5 times over the course of the next couple of days, and then decided I wanted to write a movie like that. So, a 12-year-old kid from Utah who had never seen drugs wrote a Trainspotting ripoff, and that's how my life as a writer began.
That is a great story. Um, Ian, there's an old adage in Hollywood that there's no repeated path towards the screen for any project. That every project has its own unique journey to make it to the screen. But the your latest film, Infinite, seems to have an especially interesting backstory and origin story to it. Could you walk us through what are the milestones that led this story to the screen?
It's had a long and complicated history, so get a snack. You're going to be here a while. Uh, Basically, back in 2009, this novelist named Eric Micrantz, who lives in Denver, wrote and self-published this book called The Reincarnationist Papers, about a secret society of people who can reincarnate upon death and retain all their past memories and skill sets. So he self publishes this. He's selling it on Amazon. It sells. He was telling me like that first run sold under 1,000 copies, but one of those copies somehow wound up in a hostel in Kathmandu, and around that time, I think it's probably, I don't know, 2012 at this point. this executive named Rafi Crone is in Kathmandu on vacation, and he is staying in that hostel and finds a copy of the book laying on a shelf. He opens it up, and on the first page, there's a bounty that says, "Whoever finds this book and helps me get it sold to a studio, or sold to a major publisher, I will give you 10% of whatever I receive." So he's like, I like money, so he starts reading it and realizes, oh my God, there's a movie in here. So Rafi comes back to the U.S. He tracks down Eric. He gets the rights to the book. He they start sending it out to writers, and basically like after a series of near misses, the book made its way to me, and I just instantly fell in love with this thing. Like I just saw what this could be. I was like, this feels like the next Matrix. Like I was just instantly obsessed with it. So I wind up just writing it on spec. At that point, my manager John Zazirny just paid for the rights to the book himself. I told him I would need about a year to write it. And anyway, cut to 3 years later, I'm still not done with the script. It was just an insanely complicated adaptation, and it was something that I had to put aside anytime I would get a paying gig. So we finally finished this thing. We take it out to Paramount. Well, we take it out to the whole town. Paramount comes in first and buys it, and then it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, great, we got a studio. This must mean that we're off to the races. But what happened was immediately after that happened, the president of the studio left. A new guy comes in. He takes a look at the slate. He sees how much my movie is going to cost to produce. And keep in mind that the spec draft of this was easily a $200 million movie. Like it was the biggest, craziest, most expensive thing I'd ever written. And he's like, yeah, we're not spending that kind of money on something that's not a well-known piece of IP. So crosses it off the list. I don't even know it yet, but the movie's dead. So the thing that brought it back to life was Antoine Fuqua had been called into Paramount because they're interested in having him do Snake Eyes. And Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, who's the producer on Snake Eyes and also the producer of Infinite, slips him Infinite. And Antoine comes back to the studio and says, this is my next movie. And so they're like, great, we love that movie. So they bring him on. I do a bunch of drafts for him. We put together this incredible cast and went and shot it in the UK, Thailand, Mexico, Cambodia, and New York over the course of a few months in 2019. We were supposed to come out in theaters all around the world in August of 2020, with our first trailer dropping on March 15th. So as we're leading up to that day, I get this email from Paramount. They're like, "Hey, there seems to be a slightly bigger story in the news this week. Let's hold a beat on this trailer." So we at that point the promotional campaign and the movie's release date were all in flux. So jump ahead to now, and we are coming out on Paramount Plus, and movie drops tomorrow. So yeah, but this is tomorrow is the culmination of God. If the book came out in 2009, then that would be what, like 12 years worth of work? Yeah.
Wow, that is an incredible story. You give us a lot of fodder for questions here, but
I've got a few myself.
I think one place to start is you've got a very successful career as a writer, writing your own original thoughts and ideas, and you in this particular script take someone else's thoughts and ideas and sort of make them your own in writing a script based on a book. Can you talk a little bit about how that process is different than it would be to say imagine your own characters and create something based on that, where you're taking things that exist in someone's mind but recrafting them in some ways?
Yeah, this was my first time adapting a book, and the book itself is a complicated beast to adapt because it has multiple timelines and tons of world building and rules that you have to create, and uh, it has a unique set of challenges because when you have a movie about reincarnation, you have characters that don't actually die. So all of a sudden, the usual stakes that are involved in a sci-fi action movie, you need to figure out how to create your own. Um, so with this, I really fell in love with the world of the book and the possibilities offered by the characters. And uh, that said, the book itself is very different from the movie. It's much deeper and darker and more philosophical, and it's got a greater degree of psychological complexity. In order to do a faithful adaptation of this, I would need to do it as an HBO series. It's that dense. So when I was reading this, I kept asking myself, like, okay, what's the version of this that I can get made? What's like the summer popcorn version of this? So what the movie is something that takes the world of the book, but tells it's a different, unique story within that world. Um, so like if you have something that like, if you have a piece of source material that is clearly geared to be done as a 2 hour summer movie, then it's a less complicated adaptation. That's why like comic books are so beloved as adaptation sources because they're naturally lending themselves to cinema. Um, so with this, it was a lot of me trying to figure out how to tell the 2 hour version, how to uh, take a story that is about memory and past lives, which are very internal, and make that external and propulsive. It definitely offered its unique set of challenges.
So, Ian, you imagine these characters in your head. You're putting words in their mouth. Tomorrow, the world gets to watch Mark Wahlberg and all these amazing movie stars saying these words and acting these things out that you were putting on the page. Um, what is that like to see Mark Wahlberg saying these words that you typed on a page on your computer one day, and how do you reconcile the movie you were watching in your head as you were writing this versus the movie that is now going to be on the screen?
Oh, I think this is kind of a two-parter here. My reaction to seeing these movie stars uh, delivering my dialogue and acting out these scenes that I was writing at a booth in Fred 62 in Los Feliz years ago was one of the most thrilling things in my life. Like especially because the actors that we got for this movie uh, are all absolutely seasoned pros. That is, they bring so much to the table, and I've never had actors of this caliber in a movie of mine before. Like don't get me wrong, I've worked with fantastic actors in the past, but this is a different ball game because you've got these people who've been nominated for Oscars, people who had decade long careers and have been in all these iconic projects and played iconic characters. So watching, for example, like Chiwetel Ejiofor uh, spit out this monologue that I wrote for him was just so gratifying. Like just watching him sink his fangs into those words. There was no other feeling like that in the world. It made all the hard work worth it. Now, in terms of like the movie that existed in my head versus the movie that's on the page, sorry, the movie that's on the screen, I think that one of the things I've discovered, since I started getting movies made, was that once a studio buys your script, the only thing you really have control over is the quality of your next draft. Uh, at that point, it very much becomes the director's show, and the result you're watching is the end product of that director's vision. So when I read the script feels like 100% my baby. When I watch the movie, it feels like partially my baby, partially Antoine's baby, partially Lorenzo's baby. Like it becomes a thing with many fathers. Uh, so there's if it's one of those situations where if I wanted absolute control over a project and to see like every word that I wrote get put up on the screen, I should have probably A, written something cheaper, and B, directed it myself.
um, that's a great answer. In this particular story, where you are dealing with the idea of reincarnation in this other world, it's sort of this mix of ancient ideas and future ideas, but we have to observe these characters with our present mindset. Um, are there complications to trying to get the subtext right in a story like this, that the audience is going to say, oh yeah, this is like in our world, this is this, or I get this message from this film. Did you find that complex because it is this mix of the ancient and the future?
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the big challenges of adapting the book and of writing any story that involves reincarnation or immortality is uh, you have to walk a fine line, uh, or else the story can become overly serious or overly goofy. Like if you're not careful with how you tread it, then you have like characters talking about, oh well, back when I was King Louis the 15th of blah blah blah. Like it's really easy for it to just become goofy as hell. But if you go too far the other direction, where everybody has been alive for so long that nothing is pleasurable or exciting or joyful to them anymore, then you're just writing a depressing vampire movie basically. So because I didn't want to fall into either of those camps, uh, I with every scene where I was dealing with these characters and with these themes, the goal was to be as truthful as possible with the characters, while also looking for moments of, I guess, moments of joy that you'd only be able to get in a story like this. Because the underlying reason that I was so attracted to the source material is because, to me, this is a great wish fulfillment story. This is this asks the question, like, what would you do if you had multiple lifetimes to become whoever you wanted, to get good at whatever you wanted? If you had all the time in the world to develop the skill sets that you care about, what would that make you into? And the because that idea is so inherently fun to me, I wanted to make sure the movie leaned into that sense of fun.
They say that a writer learns all new lessons every time they tell a new story. What sorts of lessons did you learn in telling this story?
Oh, that's a great question. First off, I learned, don't write an action set piece that takes place in snow. That's the snow will be like the first thing to go, because as Lorenzo told me, he's like, no, that if you write an action set piece that takes place in snow, we're going to be chasing snow. Like we're gonna like whenever you need there to be snow, the snow doesn't happen, and whenever you don't want it, then it shows up. So that just on a practical level, that's one lesson I learned. I I got such a such a crash course in seeing what kinds of material movie stars react to. Everybody has their particular things that attract them to a role, and it's something that I think a lot more about when I'm writing my characters now that I've had that experience. Like I say, like, okay, a human being has to actually say these lines? Am I giving them something that feels truthful? Is this something that would actually be able to come out of a human being's mouth? Uh, like when I'm writing this character, am I giving them enough choices and actions within their scenes that an actor would be attracted to it? Uh, Prior to working on this, I didn't really give that much thought into what makes a movie star role a movie star role. But now, having had this experience, I'm realizing that it really comes down to giving them a lot of choices, a lot of agency, letting them be the thing that drives the plot, um, giving them that unique point of view, and just giving them moments where they get to be seen by the audience in a new way. Like they say that, like, if you want to get better odds of selling a spec, write a role that could change a movie star's life. Uh, and so with this, like, obviously, Wahlberg's done big crazy movies like this, but I've never seen the dude do the types of things he does in this movie. Or with our bad guy played by Chiwetel. uh, I had written that role in such a way where uh, the thing that's motivating our bad guy is he's a reincarnated soul who's been alive since the dawn of man, and all that endless time has become hell to him. It's become endless repetition, and all he wants to do is get off the ride, but he can't. He just keeps being reincarnated into new bodies. It's driven him insane. So his plot is, if he can just stop all life on the planet, make no more bodies to be reincarnated into, then he gets off the ride. So essentially, our bad guy is enacting a global scale murder suicide plot because he's in pain. And I thought, that there's something really tragic about that figure, and that's not something you normally see in these types of big budget action movies. So giving the villain that unique motivation that I hadn't seen before. I think that's an example of writing for a particular level of actor.
Oh, Ian, that is pure gold. That's really really interesting and helpful for writers to hear. Um, Ian, if you could go back and tell that little boy that was drawing the Ghostbuster drawings anything, what would you say to that boy making those Ghostbuster drawings?
That's a great question. I can think of a few things that I wish I knew earlier in my life or my career. I wish I had known how big and important television was going to become within the industry. Like, I went to film school from 2003 to 2007, so peak TV wasn't really happening yet. This was like just before that, and because of that, all the focus that I put into my work during film school was entirely in movies. Like, I was like, TV. Why would I want to go write some like networks like sitcom? Like, I want to I want to do cool shit. And then this huge shift happened where all these really smart writers started going to TV because they wanted to tell original stories. And I'm like, the last guy at the party writing, movie specs that cost insane amounts of money and just praying that somebody's going to make them. There's a reason why it took me 14 years to get my first studio movie made. So I would tell myself to broaden my horizons in that department, and be open to writing in all fields. And this is this is something that uh, I picked up from Ed Solomon when I was working for him just after film school. I had just sold my first spec, and I had gone through my first round of notes with the studio and was about to go in for a second meeting with them, and it was very clear that the studio did not actually want the movie that they had bought. Like, what I wrote was like a $40 million hard R action movie starring teenagers, and what they wanted was a $10 million PG-13 movie that kind of felt like Gossip Girl. And so I was very upset about this. I was just like, I remember like thinking like, oh wait, this is why everyone thinks writers are bitter and cynical, because we are. Like, so I ask Ed about it. I'm like, okay, so I have to go back there and talk to these people, and I gotta defend the movie. Like, I gotta, figure out how to save my vision here. Well, how do I approach this? What do I do? And what he told me was approach them from a place of gratitude and compassion. And that was not the answer I was expecting because, I thought like, ass kicking is what is called for here. But uh, he was absolutely right because at the end of the day, uh, everyone that you work with is just trying to uh, exist as a storyteller or as a creative, and if you're able to approach all of those interactions from that place of gratitude and compassion, then it means that you're you're not just wasting your time in this industry, uh, and you're not going to like lose yourself to anger and resentment and defeat because you know a lot of what we do it involves rejection and hearing the word no and things falling apart. Like most of what we write doesn't make it to the screen. But if I had taught myself just to approach everything from that place of gratitude and compassion all those years ago, I would have had a much easier time emotionally when my career was first starting out.
Oh, Ian, thank you so much for sharing your story. We're going to be better writers because of this wisdom that you've shared. So,
I'll take my 10% for that.
okay, we'll send it your way.
John, thank you so much for having me.